Now you can yell at me, I can piss people off as well as the next person, but my co-instructor, she's like the nicest person you can ever meet, and to yell at her, something's definitely wrong,
Is it possible that most of us lean practitioners fall into the trap of rushing to countermeasures before deeply understanding important topics like the current condition and organizational goals? Well, my guest today makes a strong argument that this issue is not only true, but that it may be more widespread than any of us ever imagined. His name is Drew Locher, and longtime lean thinkers out there have likely benefited from Drew's work over the years. He's a 4-time author and 2-time Shingo Prize recipient. He also works with many of the world's leading lean thinking organizations, including the University of Michigan, the Lean Enterprise Institute, and his own company, Change Management Associates. On today's show, Drew and I explore this problem-solving conundrum in great detail before coming to some potential countermeasures any of us can and likely should deliberately practice. Now, show notes for this episode, which will include links to everything Drew and I discuss, can be found over at gembapodcast.com. Just look for episode 199. You can also check out Gemba Academy's Lean Learning System over at gembaacademy.com with a fully functional trial. Now, let's get to the show. All right, Drew, well, welcome back to the show. How's it going?
Good. Thanks, Ron, for having me back.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's always good to connect with you, Drew. We were talking before we hit the record button here that I read your recent article that you posted and really resonated with me. And so I reached out to you and said, man, you got to come back onto the show and talk about this. So really appreciate you taking time, Drew, to come on. And well, in case folks that didn't hear the first time you were on, I should have looked up the episode number. We'll put it in the show notes. I can't remember what episode you were on before, but tell us a little bit about your background and maybe how you first came to learn about all this continuous improvement stuff, and then tell folks what you're up to these days.
Okay. My first exposure to continuous improvement was back in General Electric in the 1980s. It was kind of required.
Yeah.
Part of their management development programs that I participated in. And from the early days, I was sort of a Demonite. I usually warn people of that. The teachings of Dr. W. Edwards Demon.
Yeah. And
I left GE in 1990. And interestingly, I went out on my own, but I also went back to school to learn more about organizational behavioral science because I felt that was a weakness. And I say interesting because my next newsletter is on that subject. In any case, I've been working with organizations in different industries since 1990. And so I'm kind of a generalist, kind of affiliated with the Lean Enterprise Institute in the early 2000s. When Jim was kind of just starting up. I got affiliated with the University of Michigan around that same time. And so I teach classes for them at the U, and also affiliated with the Theta Care Center for Healthcare Value, which they rebranded as Catalyst. So I just kind of, like I said, a generalist and just trying to help organizations in different industries wherever I can.
Yeah, you've also written some pretty awesome books, right, over the years.
Thank you. Yeah,
many that I've used, and I think maybe that's what we talked about on the first podcast. I can't remember.
Probably.
yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, hey, so let's talk a little bit about this article, and we're gonna link to it in the show notes, which will be this is episode 199, Drew, one away from 200. Wow. Yeah. So we're cranking them out, baby, cranking them out. So episode, just to go to gembapodcast.com, look for episode 199. Definitely want everyone to read this article because it's, I would say it's kind of one of those like must read type things. There's a few pieces that you come across where like you really need to read that, and it's a short read, so it's not going to take a lot of time.
Short.
Yeah, no, it was beautiful. I loved it, and I always tell you, I first to admit, a lot of times I don't read a lot of our fellow lean bloggers and all the rest of it right these days much anymore. I just don't have time. There's so much out there, but this one got my attention and I read every word of it more than once. So good stuff. So first of all, before we kind of dive into the meat of the article and what it was really about, I'm curious what compelled you to write it?
I typically write on things that I observe and not just once or twice, but recurring kind of observations.
Mm-hmm.
It's why my newsletter, it's not even monthly. If I don't have something compelling to say or share, I don't write it. And this particular subject was something I saw a lot of last year, and I always tend to reflect at the end of the year anyway. But what I observed more specifically was just people not practicing process improvement, PDCA, whatever you want to call it, properly. And what's interesting that really made me write it is when I would kind of point out these things to folks, they didn't always respond very well, certainly not in the spirit of lean, of continuous improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt, it was worthy of sharing with the audience out there. Like from my newsletter, I probably have about 4,000 names or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then, on the social media platforms like LinkedIn, and the response that I got, not just from you, but actually probably about 24 other people,
mm-hmm.
tells me it was a good topic that resonated with people. And in particular, it really helped a number of people, or prompted them to reflect on their own PDCA practice.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. So the title of the piece is "You Have to Be a Player Before You Can Be a Coach," and then the subtitle is "This article discusses a key obstacle to developing a continuous improvement culture." So, again, I want everyone to read this article, but go ahead and give us the highlights of the article, and maybe talk about the situations that you experienced there in those training classes that you were in.
Right. So the article refers to some personal experiences in delivering several workshops, one of which is the Kata for Daily Improvement at the University of Michigan, of which I am a co-instructor for. And during that workshop, we have a simulation. You always have to have games for adult learning. And in that simulation, they are to practice improving the simulated factory. And then we would use that experience to provide the basis for practicing what Mike Rother, the author of Toyota Kata, what he refers to as the coaching kata. And how do you teach and develop the problem solving and process improvement abilities and mindsets in others? So the workshop is pretty tightly integrated with the simulation, and you just can't kind of separate them. It's all based on experiential learning. Gives us a common experience that we can have a dialogue about, and that's really the purpose of such simulations. But what has been amazing to us, and myself and my co-instructor, her name is Tony Benner, and it's caused us to do a lot of reflection. Because what has been amazing to us are these very, very strong emotions that are generated during this program, this multi-day program. In particular, from quote-unquote seasoned continuous improvement professionals. Mm-hmm. And as I get into in the little article is, as we are doing the simulation, a lot of the CI professionals are like, well, I know how to improve this, and they are very predisposed to implementing lean concepts and tools in the simulation without really understanding the business case, without understanding the current conditions of that simulation. And it's a simple simulation. It's a little product, goes through 3 workstations, assembly, nothing complicated. There's some variations to it. There's variable demand. It's you have to ship every day. There's raw material. There's material movement. There's other aspects of it. But what's as simple as it might seem, it really can vary based on the group itself, because we actually measure performance of the simulated factory. We do a form of profit and loss statement. We looked at quality metrics, on-time delivery type metrics, back orders and such. So it can really vary from group to group. Based on the makeup of the group. Mm-hmm. So the one particular offering of this that I referred to in the article, it's the typical CI guy saying, "Oh, we know what to do. We got to go rip apart the layout, set it up as one-piece flow, and all this." And they wanted to do that like at the very beginning. And as usual, we would push back and say, "Well, you really got to follow the process and see where it leads you, let the data kind of help you with all this, and, practice basically what we preach, don't jump to conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, for the most part, the attendees, and in particular the CI professionals in the group, they really can't help themselves to the point where, as I said, it generates lots of emotion. And Ron, this is, some people don't believe me, but people yell at us during the workshop. Now, you can yell at me, I can piss people off as well as the next person, but my co-instructor, she's like the nicest person you can ever meet. And to yell at her, it's just something's definitely wrong, So it really generates a lot of emotion. I share in the article where, one guy got up and was just screaming, and then later he acknowledged he really wasn't yelling at us. He was yelling at himself because he came to the conclusion he was not practicing PDCA properly. And I said, well, would you be willing to share that with everyone? He was no, because I think he was embarrassed. We've had others that, yelled and, told us we didn't know what we were doing because the solution is obvious. And as much as we tried to encourage them to stick to really the proper process and the proper thinking, don't jump to conclusions. Let the data and the facts, drive you. They just couldn't help themselves. And the last time we ran it in 2017, it was another situation like that. We ran, when we have large groups, we run 2 simulations concurrently. I take a group, and my co-instructor, Tony, she takes a group. And her group at that in this particular time, they just couldn't accept following the process and the methodology. And they insisted, and she goes, what do I do? And I'm like, you'd have to let them do it. So they go and they change the layout, and they do one-piece flow and put pull systems in. My group's looking over saying, hey, how come you're not letting us do that? And I said, well, tell me, I'll let you do anything if you can show the proper thinking. What's the data telling you, the current conditions? What is our direction of our business, and how does that all align and support what you want to do, or vice versa, really? How does it, you want to, the experiment and changes you want to make, how does that align with our direction, our goals you set, the current conditions? And, they would usually couldn't make those connections, and then they would kind of concede. And I said, okay. And then they would follow the process, which was, look at the data. And a lot of it in this particular group was they had quality problems. So frankly, to put a flow system in when you have huge quality problems, all you're going to do is flow more crap faster. Right. I didn't make that statement to them, but I knew that's what would happen. So my group stuck with the process, stuck with the thinking, and they kept looking over, saying, "How come? You're not letting us make those changes?" And at one point, because there's about 4 PDCA cycles that we have the attendees go through during the 2 days, I said, "Go take a look at how they're doing." As we have like a scorecard of their factory performance, and they came back and they were astonished that group was still not making money. Even though they made all these changes, they went to a layout change with a flow line and a one-piece flow, and they still were not making money. And my group was making money. And I just said to them, I was like, listen, I can't show you anymore, why it's so important to stick to the methodology. Because even in a silly little game, which again amazes me, the emotional attachment people have to it in a short time. Mm-hmm. It really brings out a lot of real world issues in terms of proper PDCA practice or improper, which makes it a great experience, I believe, for the attendees, as long as they can learn and accept. So my group was like, wow, I really got to look at how I've been doing things all these years. And in subsequent emails and communications I had with some of them, they indeed did. Where the other group that just jumped to solutions without understanding current conditions and, tying it to specific goals of the organization, they just did what lean people do. Yeah. They had a pretty bad experience and just tossed it up to, wow, this silly simulation.
Yeah.
And again, this is not just one experience. We've run into this quite a bit we're very upfront with the groups now. And we tell them exactly what I'm telling you. And that's helped a lot. This particular group just couldn't control themselves.
Well, now I've not been in the workshop, but I'm assuming that we're kind of perhaps exploring the improvement kata, coaching kata, and so forth. And I believe it was in your article or something else that I read from you. We were talking about the tendency for the so-called guru, right? The continuous improvement, expert with air quotes. Can't see my air quotes, but air quotes. Who? Oh yeah. I'm here to learn the coaching kata. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and then, okay, cool. Have you heard or practiced the improvement kata? Well, yeah, I'm a lean guy. I've been doing this for 15 years, worked at Toyota, whatever it was, and come to find out that they don't really have any experience on the improvement kata, but because they are the experienced veteran, they need to be mastering the coaching kata. So I'm guessing you've seen this, right? And it has to be problematic because, to your point, if you don't understand the mechanics of the improvement kata, how are you ever going to coach it?
And these are people in roles, and part of their responsibility is to teach others and develop the skills in others. So if their skills are questionable, what are they teaching?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really my concern. And a lot of people in our lean community are concerned by that as well. I know, Mike Rother's a good friend, and he and I have had this conversation numerous times before.
Yeah,
and that's one of his teaching points of the whole kata methodology is proper practice.
Yeah.
Among other things like, PDCA can happen pretty quick. It doesn't have to be dragged out projects and things. We can practice rapid PDCA, but it's got to be proper practice.
Well, and it's got to be, I don't know, the thing that's really taken me aback from the whole kind of kata movement or whatever. I don't know what the right word is, but it's the essence of deeply understanding the current condition. We've all grew up on, even Mike's book, right? Learning to see, right? We all learned how to do value stream maps back in the day. And it was I think it was a good step in the right direction of forcing us to at least map a current state, right? Before we even thought about the future state. But somehow over the years, we've lost our way a little bit in the lean community of maybe there's just so many tools and so many fun things that you can go out and do that's stopping and deeply understanding your current condition. It's just not fun, or I don't know what it is.
You brought up value stream mapping, and I have 2 books on this subject, and I get a lot of emails and questions and such from folks on it, and I find quite often they're doing a current state map without going to see.
Yeah.
And, that is a huge flag right there.
Yeah.
Red flag.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we always were clear enough about what we mean by grasping current conditions and mapping out current state. And, it has to, include a strong dosage of go see.
Yeah.
We do go see in the simulation, but we also go see, sometimes we'll do the class at a host company. And in years past, the attendees will go and look at processes in the host company. And it struck me there, even a few years ago when kata was just starting to get going, and that people were not looking objectively. So they would physically be there and watching. And then when you would talk to them, well, what do you see? They're seeing, we need to do 5S there. This is out of place there. And it's just like, wow, they're not even looking objectively to understand current conditions, current state.
Mm-hmm.
So that, leads you to a different conversation. Why are people taking these biases that's clouding their vision?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it with value stream mapping as well. People map what they think it is, not what it actually is.
Right.
People will have like procedures out and say step by step, here's how here's the steps for the map. And I'm like, that's in a procedure. What do we really do?
Yeah.
And they don't want to accept that the procedure might not be reflective of reality.
Mm-hmm.
So, why do people have these biases? And we actually, talk about this quite a bit. I think the CI professionals have been so trained to to just get things done. Check the boxes of lean tools, lean concepts. The more you implement, the better you're doing your job. And I think then because of that, they've not taken the proper approach, which might require some additional time and all to actually go see, because you can't just go look for 15 minutes. You got to sometimes look. I used to go out and look for a day at least. At processes in the 90s that I was being asked to change, facilitate change by that point. And, it's just like, so if that's where their mindset is all in this, just do, that is kind of, I think, clouding their vision. Mm-hmm. So they're just looking at what lean tools are we not applying rather than what's the problem here? Yeah. What's this process and what problems are associated with it? Mm-hmm. And Toyota folks are brilliant at this, right? The whole Ono circle, that people have heard and referred to, that it forces you to watch. Mm-hmm. Don't come back with solutions is what I was told they would frown upon. Mm-hmm. So we have to, I think, teach people again how to look objectively. Now, part of that is gathering data. Part of that should be gathering data and facts. But if we're so biased, so prone to just doing, and we skip the whole plan stage of PDCA, we're still going to struggle with that. Because we gather data in the simulated factory and the workshops. And I run into the same problem, Ron, when we do A3 workshops. Mm. And you see these predisposed biases, jumping to conclusions, not really taking the time to grasp current conditions, not really setting goals and targets before they jump to, coming up with countermeasures. And you see it in that environment as well, or I see it in those when I'm teaching A3. Just another methodology of improvement, so you can certainly see an improper practice pretty easily, given the visual nature of the storyboard, the A3 storyboard. Mm-hmm. So, so we've got a problem in the lean community where we are imposing our predisposed biases. We're not seeing what is really happening in a lot of cases, and we're all human, so we all are prone to this. We just have to, be aware of it and stop it as it's happening.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts then, Drew? We've talked a lot about maybe the problem and some of the issues that are out there for all of us, right? So what's the appropriate countermeasure, or perhaps what sort of experiments should we be running ourselves as we try to improve the way and learn more about the way that we practice continuous improvement?
So with any improvement methodology, whether it be a personal one or a business process improvement methodology, it all starts with acknowledging a problem. Mm-hmm. So I think people have to, every step of the way, whatever methodology they're using, stop and say, am I doing this right? And remember, kind of have a mental checklist, or maybe a physical checklist that you go through and say, all right, I'm in the plan stage. Did I grasp current conditions? Did I get data and facts? Am I interpreting those properly? And if I'm not sure the answer to those questions, go ask somebody. Hey, this is what I did. This is what I gathered. Do you think that was sufficient, Ron? Are you interpreting this data the way I am? Get others involved that might not even know anything about the process that's being looked at. If it's a problem-solving kind of, issue that's being addressed, when you get to root cause, just stop and pause and say, are these really potential causes? Do they look like, I'm jumping to conclusions? Any of these I can kind of test, so every step of the way we should be reflecting. One of the beauties of storyboards, Deming's storyboards, which Mike Rother has as an integral part of kata, and also Toyota uses as part of their A3 methodology, is, there's these chapters of the story, these sections of the storyboard. And there should be, when I teach, I say there should be reflection every step before you move on. to make sure, okay, yeah, I'm doing this properly. We actually have a series of questions for each of those sections to ask, some of which I just shared a moment ago. So before you get too far along and realize, I'm not, not exhibiting proper practice of PDCA. With a storyboard itself, particularly A3 storyboards, you can sometimes physically see it. People are filling in the countermeasures before they have current conditions. Or you'll see countermeasures before they even have a target or goal. And then you can see that. Well, if I can see it, anyone can see it, I would hope, and say, why am I filling that box in before this other box? Now, I'm not I want to make sure people don't get to the thought that, you have to be very inflexible with these methodologies. I don't believe you can be. I think you've got to have some flexibility given the nature of your undertaking, the process improvement initiative, the nature of your problem, nature of the story, really, if you're going to use storyboards. So you have to be a little flexible, but there's some real key red flags where, again, I'm filling in countermeasures and I haven't really done an adequate job with current conditions, or I haven't even set a goal or target. Well, how do you set countermeasures without doing that first? I don't know. But people do it.
I was talking to my colleague Steve Kane today. We were talking about a customer who's interested in kind of more wants to kind of start learning how to practice the so-called kind of daily Kaizen, making little improvements each and every day, which is obviously good stuff. But then we were talking about, the only danger in that is, or maybe it's not danger, but it's like, so this imagine just everyone just runs around and they just make a little bit of everything just a little bit better. But there's not really a purpose behind it aside from the fact that I'm supposed to make something better today, right? So this we were talking about how, like, within kata, it's like, well, but we always have this target condition, right? Which is whatever it is, a couple weeks out or something that we're trying to aim for, which then leads us to this long-term challenge, right? A year away or something like that. But without those beacons, if you will, I think there's a lot of potential for these little improvements. I won't say they're a waste of time because that's probably way too over the top, but man, it could be so much better if you took that same effort and aligned it towards a purpose, or in this case, a target condition, right?
Dr. Deming was very, very clear on this. All improvement should be directional. And it's that directionality that, Mike Rother included in his methodology that gives people that common purpose. So we're kind of all rowing in the same direction. So that's got to be part of it. In A3 methodology, it's the background section, the very early, the first section basically of the storyboard is where you make that connection or ask for help to get you to make that connection. So you're more assured to working on the more appropriate things. Because like you said, we could be, doing drive-by or kamikaze Kaizen and not really improving performance at a higher level. And there could be short-term benefit to that if we're doing proper PDCA practice. The short-term benefit would be, let's say I'm engaged in just rapid PDCA and just kind of working on my own. That proper practice is developing my skill. So that's a good thing. But I shouldn't have any sort of delusions that what I'm improving is going to help the business in any significant way if I've not made those connections to a direction of the business, longer term challenge. So like I tell people, we have a lot of people have like idea boards up. And this was a subject of another newsletter I did, about get her done. That generated a lot of response as well. And it talks about how people are just focusing on getting things done, but not really proper practice. They're PDing, but not PDCAing. Sometimes they're not even PDing. They're just peeing and they
or D.
And they're not realizing the doing hasn't quite happened. Or happened in any effective way. So that newsletter got into that, another kind of a variation of improper practice. But what's interesting is that, so I was going around and to a number of companies, and they were showing me their idea boards. And, I'm looking at these ideas and I'm thinking, okay, great, engaging people and all. What do you do with these ideas? Are we going to try to follow through on every one of them? It could be 1,000. That might not be practical. If we do follow through on some, how do we know they're kind of the more correct things to work on? The thing that I learned in those interactions was that, I would explain to people every idea that people give you for improvement is an opportunity for personal development. So you might look at an idea and say, this is really not going to help us much. Well, first I would ask, how do you know? Let's go gather facts and some more data to maybe you're wrong, as a manager or leader that's judging these ideas. There was a number of ideas that I picked up off of these boards, and we started the conversation, and the manager's like, we're not going to do anything with that. I'm like, why? That's not going to help. How do you know? And, make a long story short, after a little more conversation and with the idea initiator, find out this was a very good idea. So you have to be too, quick to judge. Again, that predisposition or bias, we got to get some data to kind of decide, do we do this or not? What's the scale of this problem? What's the magnitude of this problem? So, if let's say it's like, all right, it's not going to be such a big idea, or have a big benefit. We gathered some information, but you know what? We could do this pretty quick, and it would help that idea initiator with some coaching further develop their problem solving and process improvement abilities. Let's do it. But let's be upfront with that person and say, listen, we know this is not going to cure world hunger, or our part of it. But we want to go through this as a learning opportunity for you. And I've done that many, many times. And people be like, sometimes they'll say, let me pick something else to work on. Or sometimes it's like, okay, let's do it. I'm like, okay, just realize when you get to the check, it's not going to be some huge, improvement.
Right.
But that's okay. We can get through this PDCA cycle in a week or two.
Yeah.
And you'll learn, and the more you practice, the more you'll learn, and the quicker you develop the skills. So I think as long as we're upfront with people, we can still take advantage of some of those opportunities to practice properly PDCA. Just knowing upfront, we're not going to be helping the business in any significant way.
Yeah. Yeah. Last thing I'll say on this section, and we'll jump into the reflection section here, but I couldn't help but think earlier when we were really harping on the importance of understanding that current condition, the current state, if you will. I couldn't help but think about our friends, way back when the Four Horsemen, when they were kind of coming up with these JI and JR and JM programs and job relations in particular. What's step one? Get the facts, right? And, it's just that, but we just, especially on those interpersonal problems or people problems, if you will, what we very rarely get the facts. We just jump to conclusions, right? And assume we know what's going on. And goodness gracious, most of the time when we assume, we're wrong, right?
And the danger of assuming. Be great.
Yeah.
The last thing I would say on Go See, we'll have people go time operations, and they'll come back with a number. Oh, the average cycle time for that operation is, 30 seconds. And I'll say, well, what else did you see? And they're like, well, it's 30 seconds. And I'm like, I always kind of try to prompt people up front when they're going to go do something like time an operation. Say, there's two purposes for you going to time that operation. One is it's going to force you to look closely at the operation. You got to look at, and understand and then pick your points of what you're going to time. Number two, and part of that is as you're timing, what else did you see? Let's say on average it's 20 seconds. Sometimes it was 40. Ooh, why was it 40? I didn't make notes of that. Sometimes it was 10. Ooh, what happened when it was 10 seconds? I didn't make notes of that. And I'm like, those notes, and those observations are probably more important than the number.
Yeah.
But more often than not, they come back with a number, and that's all they come back. And when you start asking, probing, what else did you see? They're looking at me like, what? I don't understand. This is the number you asked for. I was like, well, I asked for two things.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Well, awesome. We could talk all day on this topic, but it's really good stuff. So definitely, again, want everybody to go read that article. So go to gembapodcast.com. This is episode 199, and you can find a link to Drew's article, and also sign up for Drew's newsletter, which I highly recommend that everyone do. So I just got a few questions here I want to run past you. These are some new questions that we've rolled out here in 2018, Drew. And this first one is kind of an interesting one. You've been around for quite a while, and you've seen a lot, and you've learned a lot and done a lot. But I'm curious if there's one thing that if you could kind of go back based on what you know now about lean and just continuous improvement, if you could do anything differently, maybe the way that you've personally practiced lean, is there anything that you would change?
Well, I would accelerate my own learning. What took decades sometimes to learn. I think back to the 1980s and the work that I was doing at GE, I could have been much, much more effective. I had some very wise people point things out to me of improper practice. Sometimes they worked, quote unquote, for me. And sometimes I took that in earnest. Sometimes I did not. Sometimes I didn't fully understand the depth of what they were suggesting. So I think like any human, you spend a life of learning, and boy, if I only knew then what I know now, I could have been much more effective.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
What's next for the lean movement? What do you think? What do you think the next? Next thing is?
I think there's going to continue to be this understanding and the importance of the human side of lean. And matter of fact, again, that's going to be my next newsletter. And I'm not talking about, quote unquote, respect for people, where, oh, geez, humans are our most valuable assets. I think that's great, that more and more organizations are understanding that. What I'm referring to is really getting personal. And I think, I never worked at Toyota, but some of the folks I've known that did, like a John Shook, it gives me this sense that they really do get work one-on-one developing others. Because you're dealing with humans, and we come in a lot of variations. And to really figure out how to develop another person, you got to get personal. So what has been very interesting to me, and I've seen it in the last several years, particularly at the fall conference that you attended with AME, more workshops on, like like there was the group from Capital One's been doing a workshop on, I'm going to probably not get this right, but addicted to the status quo. I think that was the title of one of their presentations or workshops. And when I sat with them and asked them, what are you doing? What's the key points of your presentation? And it was basically taking what people have been doing for decades now on addictive behaviors, therapies and treatments for those, and kind of applying it to, continuous improvement. And I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I said, what do you mean? This is like, brand new. And I was like, no, this actually goes back about 100 years. So, it's not what I call it. It's what was titled The Psychology of Learning. And it goes back to 1913 by Dr. Edward Thorndike. That really gets into, what makes people tick. And he did experiments with people. He also did animals. But, it's all that affect behavior, everything from Pavlov's dog, hey, positive reward kind of thing. It's all that type of behavioralist, Maslow, Skinner, that it really always resonated with me. Because again, what I learned in the 80s at GE is I did not understand the behavioral side of all this. So I intentionally, when I left GE, I went back to school to learn organizational behavioral science. And that's where I got my formal education. And that's when I started thinking like, wow, I just knew this, 10 years before, or 5 years before. So what I'm seeing a lot more of is people are starting to recognize the need to get personal with people, one-on-one. It's not, we too quickly just, dismiss people as, they'll never get it. They're concrete heads, rather than really sit down with them and understand where are they coming from. And that's really very supportive of the respect for people, which is one of the pillars of Toyota's system.
Yeah.
But, if we keep just kind of dealing with people with broad brushes and all, I think we're going to continue to struggle with creating cultures for continuous improvement, because cultures are made up of humans. And if we're not treating them properly and understanding, how humans learn. You mentioned TWI and the J's. JI is actually based on the psychology of learning and the need for repetition. To put things to short-term memory. So we've known for 100 years what it takes for people to learn, and PDCA is a learning cycle. It's a learning process. What it takes them to change and create new habits. We've known that for really 100 years. What's sad is not many business leaders or CI folks understand. So therefore, they're not thinking and considering these things in their interactions with the people they're working with and developing. And we're probably losing a lot of good people on the way. Again, just dismissing them out of hand as, they're just concrete heads or anchor draggers. They'll never get it,
Yeah.
And so I see more sensitivity to that and more understanding of the importance of it, which warms my organizational behavioral science heart. So I see more of that happening. The tools have been out there, the pull, flow, and Kanban and 5. There's not much more teaching there. We've got enough experience in the high mix, low volume environments. That was like the last knowledge gap I thought out there,
What I think what's going to happen now, a lot of people have kind of transitioned out of manufacturing into healthcare. I think healthcare in some cases has maybe past manufacturing in some organizations as far as their. So I wonder when it's going to happen where some of these healthcare folks are going to okay, we fixed here. Now we got to go back to manufacturing, It
would not surprise me.
Yeah.
You go back years ago, SPC, Statistical Process Control, found a better, more welcoming home in the highly transactional financial institution industry.
Yep.
And then people started coming back and applying it and learning to apply it in manufacturing. So it wouldn't surprise me. And healthcare people, by the nature of their industry, tend to be a little more empathetic, more understanding of human behavior, human emotions that are a huge part of all this.
Yeah.
So that's my thought.
Cool. Well, I think that would be a great thing to happen if it does in fact happen, and I could see it happening myself. So I got one more question for you, Drew. I'm really interested to hear what you say about this one. So, I mean, as you know, back to the old days of our lean tools, one of the most popular tools that we all kind of learned very, very early on was the 7 wastes, right? And then it so happened that 7 wasn't enough, and we had to add the 8th, and that was some form of we're not utilizing people or their skills or whatever it was. So some use of people's abilities. So that was the 8th waste, and so people are very passionate about that. No, we do the 8 waste here. No, okay, that's all good. If you had the power, Drew, to add one thing that everyone focused on as hard as they focus on these 7 or 8 wastes, what would that one thing be?
Wow, that's a tricky question, Ryan.
Yeah.
So what would be the one thing I would get people encouraged to focus on? I think the behavioral side of change. It's not easy. It's not expedient. But I think we've always, when you go back and you reflect, and I remember doing this many, many years ago, like in healthcare. My colleague and I were trying to do CI in healthcare in the early 1990s and failing, pretty badly. And, we would sit there and reflect, and it was like, it's not because it doesn't apply. So it's something else. So you start getting into the behavioral stuff. Are these people even ready for change? Have we made the case for change? Are we hitting them over the head, or are we really engaging their mental aspects of all this? And I think that is what people need to really focus on, is the behavioral side. Much like I learned after 7 years at GE in the 1980s, I realized I was not fully equipped to be a manager or to be a change agent in general. Mm-hmm. And I recognized that. I went back to school, I learned, and I think I've used that knowledge and skill ever since. Mm-hmm. What is it now, 25 years later? So I think that would be what I would emphasize to people. Yeah. The whole emotional side of this, the behavioral side of this.
Yeah.
And if we reflect and think about those initiatives that didn't work so well or didn't sustain, was it related to our approach? It goes to the JI mantra.
Yeah.
If the student did not learn, the instructor did not teach. Yeah. So you look at it, have to go back and look at our approach. And I think a lot of it, sometimes most of it, is the approach.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Well, Drew, we've been going on for almost 45 minutes. Time flies.
Very easy, Ron.
Well, yeah, I was going to say time flies when you're having fun. This is great, great stuff. So thanks so much, Drew, for coming on to the show. I definitely want to wrap things up with you, telling folks how they can best connect with you. We'll link to everything, but tell them how they can get on your newsletter and website, anything else.
The website is www.cma, the letters CMA, for Change Management Associates, the number 4 resultswithans.com. And on that website, there's a place to sign up for the newsletter. If you click on Learning Portal, you'll see all kinds of historic newsletters and articles that I wrote or contributed to. People can download them, print them out, and use them however way they see fit. So that's the easiest way to do it. Yeah. People want to reach out to me on Twitter. It's just my name, Drew Locher, at Drew Locher. And that's also on the website as well. Click for that.
LOCHER, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. HER.
Yeah, HER. Well, hey, Drew, I know I mentioned this to you before, but this guy's like you. It's crazy to kind of talk to you because I remember back in my early days learning about all this stuff and reading every book that I could read. I definitely learned so much from your work in those early books that you wrote. And so guys like you and Mike Rother and all these folks you guys have really made a huge impact. So thank you for all the work that you've done and are going to continue to do. So it's an honor to know you, and I'm a better practitioner for having friends like you. I can tell you that.
Thank you for those very kind words, Ryan. I've always appreciated our relationship.
Yeah. All right. Well, you take care, and I'm sure we'll see you around at a conference here or there, whatever it might be. And always fun to catch up with you, Drew.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks for listening to the Gemba Academy podcast. Now, we invite you to take a no-strings-attached, fully functional test drive of GembaAcademy.com. Gain immediate access to more than 1,000 Lean and Six Sigma learning resources, all free of charge, at GembaAcademy.com.